Sorry again for the long time I take, but I will recover it because it will be as brief as possible and leaves eventually some room for questions. It would be evidently impossible to deal here with a huge subject like BPD physiology, which would take hours, if not days, to be dealt with. So we'll try to focus on rational, because from rational, much of the basic principle of functioning can be understood. Oh no. Okay. This was the source of the rationale of BPD. The old jejunal bypass by pain. Very easy operation, as I told you already. And the problem was that all the small bowel, which is not in transit, was left blind, and this was source of many complications. We believed that reduced energy absorption was the only reliable way to obtain a stable weight loss result, and that malabsorption had to be selective for high-calorie elements and permanent. Now, evidently, the malabsorption caused by JAB was not selective, but indiscriminate, with the consequent endless list of all kinds of deficiencies to be added to the life-threatening consequences of the long blind loop. Liver cirrhosis we saw even 30 years later. So a very dangerous operation. But it was, the malabsorption was not even permanent, but temporary, and the why is easily understood. The law of short bowel says that if the small bowel from the duodenum to the ileocecal valve is longer than 60 centimeters, there is no substantial malabsorption, while less than 40 centimeters are incompatible with life. So you have to stay between these 40 and 60. And these are, as I already showed you, the huge, but they can have even bigger adaptive phenomena who are able to cause a tenfold increase of the absorption capacity. So it's evidently impossible to obtain a stable weight loss, because JAB initially reduces energy absorption below energy expenditure, thus causing weight loss. However, the narrow range of possible bypass length variability, 40 to 60, together with the huge intestinal adaptation changes, cause restoration of full energy absorption with complete weight regain in less than 2 years. This is a slide from an old article in 1974 from us, showing the very rapid recovery of the fat absorption already within 1 year after operation. And this is the famous Halverson article, who just put a stop on JIB, showing that in 101 JIB patients in a 5-year follow-up, there was a majority of late weight regain with minor or major complications. This, of course, besides all complications, causes death or restoration. So only 18% of good results. What so happened is that not the only complications, but mainly weight regain, hidden by many authors, was the real cause of the JIB abandonment. In summary, and this is important to be understood, the reason why JIB cannot produce a sustained weight loss is that the same short bowel, which should cause weight loss and maintenance, is also responsible for the absorption of the essential nutrients for survival. So it cannot be created short enough to have the desired length and thus energy absorption capacity after the completion of intestinal adaptive changes. Which was the solution of the problem? Evidently, to separate the absorption of the essential nutrients, that is water, electrolytes, vitamins, proteins, from the absorption of the calorie-rich food, that is fat and starches. And this can be obtained by acting on digestion instead of directly on absorption, so that the reduced intestinal absorption be limited to the aliments which needs digestion to be absorbed. The operation is not difficult at all, and it was not that new, because we had been doing essentially the same thing already at that time for more than 1 century for the treatment of peptic ulcer. Just a distal gastrectomy and an antrectomy with a long Roux-en-Y reconstruction, where the enteroenterostomy is placed close to the ileocecal valve. The biliopancreatic limb, very long, conveys the biliopancreatic juices to the enteroenterostomy. The stomach empties directly into the ileum, which is today, at that time it was between 200 and 300, but today we prefer 250. And the digestion and absorption occurred only in the common limb after meeting between food and biliopancreatic juices. This is the rationale of BPD, what we expected from 1972, even before the experimental study in dog, because just simple reasoning and a minimum of knowledge of the physiology of the GI tract made everything very clear. No blind loop, selective malabsorption for fat and starches, and above all, permanent limitation of the energy intestinal absorption at the desired level after intestinal adaptation, and thus excellent weight loss and maintenance. This is again an old article by us of 1975 after the completion of the experimental study, showing the 3 main defects of the jejuno-ileal bypass: indiscriminate malabsorption, quick recovery of absorptive function, and the excluded bowel. And this is how the biliopancreatic bypass eliminates all these 3 problems. How does it happen? Well, very easy. The absence of the blind loop is in the structure itself of the operation. The selectiveness of malabsorption is due to the action on digestion instead of directly on absorption, responsible for weight loss and maintenance. And the most important thing, the indefinite weight maintenance consequent to indefinite and constant energy absorption is explained by the fact that since the nutrients indispensable for survival and well-being are absorbed in the alimentary limb, the common one can be created of any length, particularly that length which will yield the desired energy absorption indefinitely after the intestinal adaptive changes. Very easy. So, now you know the rationale of BPD, and you also have the essential principles of BPD functioning. BPD functioning, to be described in depth, would require a lot of knowledge, especially of the relationship between body composition, energy expenditure, and energy intake. Maybe next time I will be happy to give a lecture on this extremely interesting subject that is the basis of the knowledge of both obesity and obesity surgery. But for the moment, I will just give you three important more aspects of the BPD intestinal physiology. First of all, a surprise, but it had to be expected. All pancreatic enzymes are digested and absorbed in the long biliopancreatic limb. So no pancreatic digestion occurs in the common one. Protein and starch absorption occurs in the whole small bowel limb between the gastroenterostomy and the ileocecal valve, and it is due mainly to the intestinal brush border enzymes. And this gives a great importance to the length of the alimentary limb. Why? Because on one side, it is responsible for protein absorption, so it has to be long enough to guarantee a good protein absorption. On the other side, it also absorbs starch, so it has not to be long enough to cause insufficient weight loss. This is the very last step in the evolution of this operation when you finally found out, after a lot of study and comparison and statistics, that 250 was the right measure. Of course, due to the necessity of bile, only fat absorption is confined to the common limb, which is very, very important. That there is a Spanish modification of this operation, which entails only the 50 centimeters of common limb and a very short and practically all the rest of the small bowel in the biliopancreatic one. But this works because the Spanish people have a lot of fat in their alimentation. So what happens after BPD? The energy absorption is not a percentage of the intake. This is a fundamental concept for BPD. there is a maximum absorption capacity, not per day, obviously, but per meal for fat and starch, which if the number of meals, which is generally 3 a day, is constant, results in a constant daily energy absorption for each individual, independent of the ingested amount, with consequent indefinite weight maintenance. So we can say that the weight of stabilization after BPD is essentially independent on the energy intake of the operated subject. And this is why the why of the indefinite weight maintenance. There are essentially 2 exceptions to this rule. A not satisfactory weight of stabilization can be changed in both directions by simply varying either the intake of simple sugars, which are obviously absorbed in the whole tract between the gastroenterostomy and the ileocecal valve. So the absorption is, as a rule, complete. Take care of simple sugar. And the other possibility to change the NFC absorption and thus the weight of stabilization is to vary the number of daily meals. Again an old version, and it doesn't matter. It's important, of course, that the intake for each meal is greater than the intestinal absorption capacity, because also only in this case the number of meals is being constant, the intestinal absorption will always be constant. This is an example. Total energy intake, 3,100 calories. You know, different intake for each meal, but the absorption is 500 calories a meal. These are the very realistic figures, because the total amount of absorbed energy is very close to 1,500. But if you take only 2 meals, it doesn't matter how much you eat in those meals, you only absorb twice 500 calories per meal. So the total amount of absorbed energy will be 1,000 calories. And what increases is simply the non-absorbed energy. Another example, 3 meals with different intake, as much as 300 and 400 calories per day, but the total amount of absorbed energy is always 1,500 calories. 5 meals for a total of the same 3,400 calories, but in this case, the total absorption is 200 and 500 calories, because you exploit your intestinal absorption capacity 5 times instead of 3. And the same will remain absorbed even if the total amount of energy intake increases up to 4,300 calories or whatsoever. So this is the absorption. This is what was in command of the absorption after BPD. You have to recommend your operated patient not to eat too many sugar and not to make too many meals a day, but there are cases where the resting energy intake of the operated patients is so high that they need to eat sugar. They need to multiply, to have several meals a day. So this is a very good thing because you are not condemned to a certain weight, which could be too low for you. You can command in both senses, increasing and decreasing your energy absorption using the number of meals and the amount of sugars. Evidently, the same type of behavior, if uncontrolled, may obviously lead to even total undesired weight regain. The BPD is the operation that requires the least patient's cooperation, but a certain degree of patient's cooperation is obviously always indispensable. The third important characteristic of BPD physiology is that the intestinal absorption is obviously greatly influenced by the intestinal transit speed. So if you use the stomach volume, and this is what I've tried to teach American people for 20 or 30 years, but nothing to do. Of course, you will have this result. A too small stomach, due to its quick emptying, can be responsible for excessive low weight of stabilization and severely limited nutrient absorption, with possible consequent protein malnutrition. So you cannot take a gastric bypass and convert it to a BPD using the same length, because you will have, as Harvey Sugarman had, a series of nutritional problems. In conclusion, the BPD, which is the only model of malabsorption currently in use, is based on a rationale resulting from reasoning, experience, and of course knowledge of the physiology of the GI tract, and on careful experimental work. This makes easy the understanding of the many aspects of its physiology. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Scopinaro.
If there are questions,
and if there are questions for, yes, please.
Mike.
Mike, please.
Thank you, Professor, for this very nice presentation. I'm from Egypt. I can claim that we have good number of doing this BPD, but we concluded something I would like to ask you about it. I think this operation is very good operation for rich people and intellectual people. Otherwise, because it's for the poor people, they cannot afford to have this for a long-term follow-up of this. Second thing, I would like to inquire about this. We have a strange phenomena after doing this operation. We noticed that the patients changed the taste of some food. They started to hate some food. I don't know why. And they lost the taste of sensation of taste, I mean, for some food. I don't know why. It's common or this? I mean,
which kind of change you mean?
They lost the taste of cucumber, for example. Some of them, they were tea addicts, and then after the operation, they hate tea. They don't like to drink tea at all. I don't know why.
Of course, I understood. So now the first thing is absolutely a very important aspect of this operation. I didn't talk about the indications and contraindications. There are, of course, contraindications, and to us, the main contraindication is poor social economical status. Because we made a study, a very accurate study on a nitrogen absorption and of fat absorption after this operation, and the protein requirement, the daily protein requirement is more than double after this operation. You need at least 90 grams of protein per day, which is nothing for people in our study, for our population, because the average intake was 140. But if you go to the lower economic class, of course, protein are the most expensive food. So cheese, meat, and so on, and we don't operate on, do not, this kind of patient. The other problem is one of the advantages of BPD, not having the pylorus anymore. You have a relatively rapid, not like after gastric bypass, but a relatively rapid gastric emptying. So you have a sort of damping syndrome without the vascular phenomena of the damping syndrome. We call it simply post-cybal syndrome. If you eat sugars, they get too much, they reach a too high concentration in the small bowel. They cold water, they dilate the jejunum, soon distal to the enterostomy, and you feel bad. So you cannot tolerate sugar anymore. It would be nice if this lasted for the whole life. Unfortunately, after a few years, the jejunum enlarges and adapts, and it is possible to eat sugars, even if not as much as before. I mean, not unlimited. Thank you, because these are two very important points in the intestinal physiology of BPD.